So we're live now. People are now going to be seeing us. Welcome. Thank you for joining me, Simon. I'm going to start by inviting people who, if you're here, please drop in the chat, tell us where you're from so we can say hello to the other participants. And Simon wants this to be, we're going to be responsive, we're going to be chatty. So if you chat in any comments like, I like this, I don't like this, and any questions that you have, chat them in. Even if we don't get to it in here, we'll come back to you and answer it, especially if it's something really specific to you. We're here to help. So thank you for joining us. Important note.
Thank you and hello.
Thank you, Simon. I'm so excited. So I do want to say, if you stay till the end, there's going to be a special offer that I've managed to wrangle Simon into giving us. So you have to stay until the end to see that, and I'll be sharing what that is. Now, brief intro. If you don't know who I am, I'm the founder of Rightwiser. My name's Nadine. You've probably seen me posting all the time here. I'm an absolute LinkedIn addict. And that's actually where I met Simon. So I met him via his course, which we're going to be talking about briefly today as well. And I just only have wonderful things to say about him. But with that, I think I am going to let you introduce yourself, Simon.
And I didn't pay her. Honestly.
You didn't pay me to do this. I know. Free ad. Can you believe it? Free advertising.
I've actually only been on LinkedIn for, I guess, the last 18 months. So my career originally started in advertising, worked in big global advertising agencies. I then pivoted, I think that's the word we use now, out of that and into building my own brand consultancy, which I built up over 10, 12 years. Very lucky to work with some of the best brands in the world at that time, and sold that business, and then decided to kick out the corporate life and focus on lovely people like you, founders, startups, and smaller businesses, and helping them build your brands and your business. So that's me.
That's fantastic. And I can only say that Simon has just been a wonderful person. And to be honest, you have given me quite a lot of free coaching, off the record free coaching. So if you guys have seen Rightwiser and how much it's grown, I've actually been running that company for like a year, but you won't have seen it because it only really grew so much thanks to Simon's course. But more about that later on. Simon's got a presentation to talk about the content treadmill, and I can see him playing with his mic because I messaged him to say it was a bit crackly and grainy. So tech issues here, guys. We're not tech people, obviously. How's that, Simon?
How's that? Is that any better?
Yeah, loads better. That might be what's happening. Yeah, it looks much cooler though to have it here in frame. So like you look very pro. I think I need one of these, what do you call them? The boomer mics with the cat on the end that people have just to look more pro. But
well, the audience will be the arbiters of that, of course.
Exactly. Yeah, you guys can.
And anybody who wants to chuck, please do chuck your name into the chat as well. I'd love to know who is, or at least say hi and where you're from, because it's nice to know that there's real people out there.
It's nice to know there's real people out there. Yes, exactly. Tell us that you are out there so we know who you are. I love that. Wonderful. Well, I'm honestly really excited. I was seeing your post about this, Simon.
Okay, do you want me to fire away?
Yes, go for it, Simon. Yes, please go for it. I'm here, and obviously I'll be butting in with questions from the audience. So I'm your guys' representative.
Hi, Ellen. Hi, Tisha.
Hi.
Hi, Trevor.
Hi, Trevor. Thank you for sending people to my... Yay!
Unholy Trinity, very fun. And Bernard from Barcelona. That's even better. That's a lovely one. Great. Okay, so shall we? We'll kick off, I think. So the natty title of Get Off the Content Treadmill, how AI is making life harder unless you do this, and importantly, how you build a brand with content. I was just saying to Nadine before this started that actually content's been around since 1990. It doesn't seem possible. Seems like a long time ago. But of course, it's in the last 10 years that it really has become a mainstream strategy for businesses to grow their brands and their business. And it's easy to forget that. In the old days, it probably wasn't possible for small businesses because you'd have to spend money on advertising, posters, or any other media which are outside the reach of smaller businesses. Right. So it's been a great blessing, but also it's bringing its problems, as we're probably all here to talk about. So let me crack along. Now, we're being told a lot about content from a lot of people who are very influential. So here's the great Gary Vaynerchuk, love him or hate him. Content is king, but marketing is queen, and the queen runs the household. Well, that's absolutely true. And Mr. Alex Hormozy, who's been coming up, on the blind side over the last couple of years, written a very, very good book, actually, £100 million offers, and has built a very significant business in a very short space of time. You don't have to be the best content creator, but you have to be the most prolific. So here we go. This quantity content point comes up. And the dear Neil Patel, if you're not producing content, you don't exist. Well, I'm not sure I agree with him on that, because there is a life, of course, for all of us outside of content creation. Thank God. Especially if you're a small business owner.
But he is
Mark
wonderful.
Schaefer, the best content in the world isn't enough if nobody sees it. Well, that's absolutely true. That is without doubt true. And finally, my beloved Seth Godin, content marketing is the only marketing left. So content obviously has developed an incredibly important part in our lives of developing our business. But I'd like to ask you a question. How does that make you feel?
A little overwhelming, isn't it? Guys, drop in, how does all of this make you feel? Like, understanding how important content is. Yes, there's a life outside of content, but there are people that really see the value in it. And there are people that here are saying it's just, you have to have it. You have to have content.
Yeah, I think that's right. Queasy. Well, Nikki, thank you. I love you, Nikki. Queasy is exactly how it makes me feel as well. And pressured, Paul, absolutely right. Pressured. And, I'm going to talk about that. Russ, curious. Yep, curious if you can wade through it all and find the bits that entertain you or interest you.
Ellen.
WTF is content anyway. Yes, quite right. So I think the point is here. I'm not seeing people effusing with great feelings of joy at the whole notion of content, and I think that's probably true. It's been valuable, but it doesn't come without cost. And to me, and I felt this very much over the last, I guess, few months, and I think, judging by people's reactions to posts I've written on this subject, it actually feels like a bit of a rat race. And that's not necessarily a good rat race, and I think many of us would like to quit it. But how do we build a business, without it? Well, we need it, but how do you use it is the question for this masterclass. And I don't know about you, but it feels like you're playing content roulette. There's a lot of this debate about, you need to get a viral post, but I think, well, that's not actually true, because if you have a viral post, 9 times out of 10, in order for you to get a viral post, you have to reach way beyond your natural target audience, which then means that you're not targeting your actual audience. All you're doing is creating attention, and actually a lot of it is wasted. So the idea of viral content actually is for all but the most broadly targeted business, which shouldn't be the people in this forum. It is not relevant. So let's not play roulette with our businesses.
No, and I may butt in there and say I actually went viral with one of my first TikTok videos. I published like a collage, a montage that I made of the Mexican Independence Day parade. We got a really good spot and everyone was waving. It was a fantastic day. I went viral. I got like, you know, thousands, hundreds of thousands of views. That's what I would call viral. And then from there, I have no business via TikTok. My videos only hit like 200 views or something. So it's, yeah, going viral, it's overrated. It's really overrated. Hi, Tapas.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit in all of us that says, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice?" But you know, from any business standpoint, it's actually not what it's cracked up to be. And where does it leave us? Well, I think it leaves a lot of us actually overwhelmed because of the pressure on the amount of content that we're required to keep up. The amount of content, because we're effectively playing the platform's game, which is that we will not show all of your content to your followers and your subscribers or your connections. You'll only get a small proportion, and the only way you can change that is by getting more attention and posting more often. So in the real world, do we really want to see multiple pieces of content from one person? No, I don't think we do. I think if we have one or two pieces of great content from the people we follow and trust over a period of time, we'd all be quite happy. But as the content producer, that's very hard to produce. So we're left in this difficult situation of needing it but not wanting it. Okay. And that was really what I felt very strongly, and I struggled with this whole idea. You know, having moved from working in the corporate branding world, where the content played less of a part, increasingly it does now. You know, this whole debate about quantity versus quality. Should you play the long game or the short game? Attention versus relevance. So I thought, well, what I want to do is to put my mind to how we can perhaps break this chain a little bit and develop a system which perhaps plays to everybody's own business strength as opposed to the platform strength. And what I think is central to this is actually making your brand the heartbeat of your content.
Love this.
I think it's very easy for us to get drawn into content templates, content ideas, and actually lose the point of why we're doing it. And inevitably that's going to happen, because if you're required to produce the sheer numbers of pieces of content, so even if you're producing, I mean, let's say you produce 5 pieces of content a week, that's 5 times 50 weeks. You know the numbers. That's 250 pieces of content, which is a hell of a lot of content to come up with. Can you genuinely come up with 250 different, interesting, thought-provoking pieces of content? It's a struggle.
It's a struggle.
And so what we're going to talk about here is a system which I created, simple system, which I think can potentially help you save some time, make actually writing that content easier, and critically, from my point of view, building your brand.
Yeah, fantastic. Right, I'm excited.
Is that all right? Are we on a thumbs up for that?
Thumbs up, guys. I don't know. I'm here and I'm excited to learn. I say I've been watching Simon like talking about what he's going to be saying, and even though I've seen his presentation, I'm still like sitting here like taking notes. So. Fab, guys, tell us if you're enjoying this, and tell us which bits you like so that maybe we know what to go into at a later date that we can do more depth on. Pop that in the chat if you can.
Hey, Vin, good to see you here. Glad you liked Content Roulette. So I'm going to ask you a quick question. What have you found the biggest challenge in developing your content? I've rattled on about what I think, but what do you think?
Tell us, guys. Tell us what you think, and maybe I'll have a go. And I'm a content person, so I do copywriting and content marketing. So, and yet,
you are. And yet
there are challenges. You're very kind. I mean, I think that there are a few queens on LinkedIn. I can think of quite a few people. I'm actually going to say Geraldine Spurway is someone that I really admire, and she said she was maybe going to watch this later. I know she's not live, but there are a lot of queens on here. Talini, Monika, all of these guys are fantastic, but Biggest content challenge. I am one of the weird people who doesn't really struggle with consistency because I really enjoy making content, but making content that is actually like to my target audience. I think I can make entertaining content, but content that sells, that's my biggest challenge, is making something that's entertaining, that people will come back for, that they won't feel as just like advertising, but does actually promote me to the people that I would like to work with. Let's see, we've got some people coming in saying, Ellen says, knowing how to sell.
That's a great point, isn't it? Is it Ellen or Annie? I don't know which. Well, anyway, whoever you are, knowing how to sell who, what I am. Yes, I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And there's a whole nother debate which we won't go into. Today. Is this point about, okay, I can promote myself as a personal brand, as an individual, but how do I relate that to my business? Two prongs for that, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. Vin, the algorithm, as I said, that's very tough to try and play the algorithm game. That's an interesting point. Russ, is new conversations, veins within the space. Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, the fact of the matter is that you're inevitably going to be talking about similar subjects to other people if you're in the space that people are interested in. And, if you're a copywriter, if you sell a food product, you're going to be talking about that subject, and there's going to be lots of other people as well. So it really does mean that, inevitably, and I'm sure you will recognize this, you hear the same things many times over from different people in the same way. So how do you stand out? Content for content's sake, Nikki. Yeah, that's what it feels like, I think, a lot of the time. Okay, let's keep going along. So those are the challenges, and I think those challenges are amplified, if you like, by the fact that 61% of consumers are actually influenced by custom content. So it does have a role to play. It is influential, so we can't just ignore it and put our heads in the sand, as much as I would wish to. And this is a stat, and it's probably more than this because it's literally more than the last piece of stat every week. It says here the average person is exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 pieces of content a day, which is just colossal.
I might apologize for some of those, maybe 1,000 of those pieces. We apologize on behalf of content people, but this is how we get the word out these days.
Yeah, and you're good. Your pieces are good, so that's a helpful difference. So how do I work I'm trying to work out how my clicker goes when there's a thing there. Oh, there we are. Okay, and here we have, coming up in the fast lane, of course, AI, which increasingly is finding its way into all of these conversations. So what you've got a new component which is really magnifying this whole effect of content quantity, because inevitably the more you make it easy for people to produce content, the more content they produce. But the truth of it is that it's more averagely good content, because as good as AI can be, if you're a real expert at using it to help you produce content or generate ideas, for the vast majority, it actually just produces fairly standard content. But it's easier to produce at scale. And when you've got those experts telling you need to operate at scale, you can see how this whole thing compounds. And of course, the end result of all that is it's harder to stand out. Okay, so this is a particular problem, I think, if you're a small business, because differentiation is very important. You have limited time. You're juggling 1,000 balls. How do you accumulate rather than just proliferate this content? And how could you make AI your friend if you choose to use it in the process? And I think there's an important distinction here between what I would call your brand hardware and your brand software. And I think what's happened is that the focus of all of our attention has been increasingly become about the software, brand software, which is about the content ideas, the content themes, the content formats, the content platforms. The airways are proliferated by, you should be doing a short on this platform, you should be doing this format, how about carousels, and so on and so on and so on. So where attention is drawn to the software, whereas actually what we need to be thinking about as brand custodians is actually the hardware, what your brand stands for, why you matter, and to who, because those are the components that will actually mean content building your brand, as opposed to just filling the funnel of content. And I think too many people confuse those two and spend a lot of time on the software and much less time on the hardware.
This is so insightful. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about this.
My brand friends in the chat, like Paul and Vin, and I hope will be nodding furiously at this point. If they're not, I'm worried. So it's the question, really: how do you align your content with your brand and not make it too complicated apart from anything else? And how do you achieve less with more? Because I think inherent in my stance here is that it's very hard to play the game that we're being asked to play. Realistically, if you want to, if you're one or two or three man business, person business, excuse me, you really do need to protect your time to actually do the work. So how do you do this? And I think inherent in that is increasingly you have to be able to produce really good content, but less of it, because otherwise you're going to get utterly burned out.
May I introduce Toast? She's come to say hello and support. Hello,
she's come
everyone.
at the right moment.
She's been jumping at the door. I eventually decided to go and let her in because I was like, they're going to hear it anyway, and they're screaming as though I'm doing something awful to her.
Well, we'll come back to Toast for some comments, I think, towards the end.
Yeah, listen in, Toast, because you could learn a lot about branding today.
Okay, so this is where I highlight. It's something I call the brand content pillar system, and there's 3 steps to this process. The first, perhaps obviously, but not necessarily something we all do, is actually clarify exactly what your brand stands for. Once you've done that, what I'm going to show you is how you can create brand content pillars that come from that brand. And then you build a content plan out of that. And what this should mean is your content is driven by what your brand stands for, not by the market, not by the category, not by all those other things, but by your brand. And that's the trick here. And to me, there are 3 things that are absolutely critical now for a brand. If you like, in your brand blueprint, I think there are 3 things that are absolutely critical. Now, I know people may have other terms and other expressions, but I've spent a lot of time working with brands, and I think what's important now is changing because of the importance of content. So way customers and consumers are changing. So to me, you need to really understand what your brand purpose is, what your brand beliefs are, and what your brand connection is. And I'll explain what I mean by those 3 things. So your brand purpose is, why do you do what you do? Now, purpose is becoming much more of a thing that people are recognizing important. People want to understand the purpose of the business they're supporting, and I think that's becoming very, very commonplace now. So brand purpose is a very important part of it. But brand beliefs are also important, and really what that is the views, your view as a brand of the world that underpins your purpose. So that means, what things are you for and what things are you against? Because that is fuel to develop your position in the minds of your audience.
Crucial.
And the final thing is what I call brand connection. People used to call this proposition, but I always have a problem with that because it's very much a one-way street. How does your brand solve your customer's problem or enable their aspiration? Those three components. Now, this is not a brand masterclass, much as I'd like it to be.
We'll do our best in the time we have.
We'll do our best. But those are the key components, and I'm not going to go into great depth in those, but just to show you why those things are so important to getting your content right. So you need those three pillars established. And just to give you an example, for me, for my business, my purpose is all about leveling up for smaller businesses and creators, helping them to build their brands. My beliefs are that actually brand building doesn't have to be complicated. I think the world of marketing and branding has made it a bit complicated. What entrepreneurs need is access to the tools and the practices and the techniques that those best brands in the world have been using, but in a simplified fashion. And the connection is, how do you solve the problem of how to grow your business by simplifying the process of building a brand? So those are really my three pillars. And just to make it even easier to understand, they can be summarized in three simple words: empowering, demystifying, and simplifying. So they've become the pillars of my content that I try to drive everything through, which everything has a focus, and I hope everything is building the brand reputation through that process.
I believe it is. I'm going to ask you, Simon, can you tell us a story about how you came to those three brand pillars? Was it a moment, a eureka moment? Was it years in the making? Tell us a bit more.
No, I think the story is really to do with the fact of, my particular journey, which is having worked with, lucky enough to work with some brilliant brands, Coca-Cola amongst many others, is that what I observed is that once you really understand how to build a brand like those companies have done, it really makes a massive difference. And the thing I saw was that when I decided to move out of that, was I saw that smaller businesses, startups, everything have less of those skills, less of that experience, and actually less of the belief in the power of brand building. And so what I wanted to do is to try and bring that message to an audience and try and make it in a way which was accessible, for businesses that haven't got huge marketing departments and necessarily huge budgets. And so that was really why I came up with those themes. So obviously out of that, you can understand the point about empowering. You can understand the point about demystifying something that for some people is very complicated and actually making it a simple process. So that's where it came from.
Oh yeah, no, it's a really noble mission actually, to be bringing these sort of these big business ideas and best practices to everyone, so that everyone can be part of this and everyone can take some of their branding, the best bits, to the world. I really relate with empowering. That's kind of something that I think is a pillar that I really think that my brand matches. I'm going to invite the audience. Do any of these three pillars of Simon's company resonate with your brand? Or if not, do you have an idea what your beliefs are, your brand beliefs? Please chat them in if you can.
Do you want me to carry on while people are thinking about that?
Go for it. Yeah, let's go for it while people are having a think, because we're about 30 seconds ahead of the chat, so they'll probably just be hearing this now.
Yeah, we'll have a pause and let people think, because this is just illustrative. And this is for me, and it won't be for you, because you will have a different set of circumstances and different positioning and different assets that you have for your business. So this is just my version of it. And I think the explanations there are reasonably clear based on what I just explained. So yeah, as Nadine is saying, just throw in a few thoughts about, if you were doing this exercise, what kind of things would be important to you and your brand? What kind of themes would you have in your pillar? Oh, well done, Nikki. We've always loved your unmuddling. which is a cool, yes, which is a version of demystifying. But I think what I like about unmuddling is that it recognises that a lot of smaller businesses have got themselves in a bit of a tangle with their marketing, and so I think your unmuddling is a great outcome. Well, that's good to hear. All three relevant to your brand, Ellen. Kirsten, distilling complex ideas into great communication. Yes, distilling.
Word distiller.
Ideas. I like distilling complex ideas.
That's her brand. Yeah, word distiller. Yeah, exactly. And those complex ideas, like simplifying it into something that people can understand. Kirsten, it's good to see you with her personally. I know that she works with a lot of really high tech companies. I think she's talking about oh God, what's the word? Like an optometrist, like an eye doctor. So distilling.
Russ,
and
explaining, demystifying, myth busting. I like myth busting. Yeah,
Russ.
and I think these themes are relevant to quite a few people. Sort of coaching personal brand space, because clearly what you're often doing is trying to provide people with a route map, if you like, to get through a particular problem or issue that you focus on. So yeah, I think it can have broad application. Okay.
Yeah, thanks everyone for chatting in.
Yeah, thanks for
Let's keep jogging along.
So to keep jogging along, as Nadine told me I had to. So just think about, I'm just trying to share how the process works. So let's say we've gone through that process, and not everybody has. And I think, we'll come on to the end. I think there is a process for actually identifying those three things. They're not necessarily things you can just sit down and write on a piece of paper and work out that's it, because they do actually come from a full understanding of your audience, what you stand for, how you position in the market, and all those things. But for the sake of example, the way you then use those is, having identified your pillars, they effectively become the lens through which you develop your content. Now, the next piece you need is a piece of insight, so which needs to reflect what your target audience's perspective is on the category you're operating in. Is there confusion there? For the sake of example, what are the things that people talk about as the problem, the challenge in the category you operate in? And then, of course, the last piece is the format. And this is the piece that most people end up starting with. So the format is, okay, what am I going to do it in a carousel or everything? But also the format is, for example, am I going to do a how-to here? Am I going to do a testimonial? Am I going to do behind the scenes? All of those different ways of expressing your ideas. But that's the last thing, not the first thing. What if you're working entirely, I'll just pause on this. So Tabas, what if you're working in an entirely different niche? Can you just explain what you mean by that? What kind of different niche? And then I'd like to answer that.
I think he was asking when you were on the last slide, Simon, or that's when it probably came through. And I think this might be even an offline question, but Tapas, drop in loads. Please give us as much information as possible. This is my content person talking. Give us as much information as possible so we can see how to answer that properly.
Yeah, I'll come back to that, because I think that's probably going to be a great question. So again, just to give you an illustration of how this works. So you've established your pillar. Let's take empower in my case. You've got an insight. A basic one is for any entrepreneur, is that absolutely is no time to do anything. And that's a real problem if you're trying to build your business and build your brand alongside all the other tasks. Now, if you add a format, which might be a how-to, for example, you might end up with a piece of content around this idea of, for example, 3 easy steps to build a meaningful brand if you're an entrepreneur that wants to level up. So that's just an example of how you use the process to develop that content. And here's another one. So let's take the demystifying pillar. The insight might be around, actually, people have limited experience of brand building, or those particular skills and techniques of brand building. And you might say, okay, well, I want to do something around a controversial point of view. So here's a potential piece of content around 3 things you don't need to know about brand building if you're an entrepreneur. So that kind of
you don't. I'm so tempted.
objection.
Yeah, the reverse psychology. Like, what don't I need to know?
Exactly, exactly. So that's just to give you an illustration of the process of how you then go about having got your pillars. It's simplifying this process, but making sure that you end up with content which is driven by your brand as opposed to driven by the audience or the market. And what does this end up looking like? Well, it ends up looking like something like this. So you've got your format on the left hand side, and anybody can go on LinkedIn and free downloads and Google it, and there are literally hundreds of formats of ideas for the type of content, from examples, new way
But
behind the
guys,
scenes.
screenshot this one because this is the good one.
Listicles, well, there are many more of those. So I'm not saying I'm originating any of those. Those are the ones that actually work, basically, in format terms. But then we put those through the funnel of your 3 pillars that are related precisely to your brand proposition, and then you get your ideas. And this is just, I mean, for those of you who've ever followed anything in terms of my LinkedIn work, you will see that I often use this illustrative style,
Yeah.
which it tries to bring everything together coherently, and you can see how that translates into posts there in that way. So they fit under each. I particularly like branding is all fluff.
Branding is all, yeah, but it's
And I
incredibly
hope you won't
important
agree
fluff.
with that at the end of this.
Who says that? I mean, I'd love to know where that first came from, and it makes me think that it was maybe a salesperson.
I've heard lots of clients actually talk about that.
Really?
Yeah, I've been confronted with that by
Yeah.
seeing people in very big companies. You won't be surprised to know I defended my ground very strongly.
As you should.
Yeah, and the evidence is actually the opposite of that. So I think I'm on safe.
I think
So that gives you a
it's
picture of the process of how we go through from getting those pillars, understanding your brand, really positioning your brand, really getting clarity on it, through to developing the content and how that translates into ideas. And then really, once you've done that, you've got that process I just said, really. You've got the 3 steps to getting your pillar. You then look at your audience problems. I mean, you should be doing this anyway. You should be researching, asking questions, generating the sort of raw ideas in your head, and then organizing them under the pillars, applying a format, and batch writing. And Nadine is much better at that than me.
He was
As
telling
she
me the other
demonstrated to
day.
me this morning.
My batch writing. Well, I mean, I think sometimes, and I don't know if this is like a creative person thing, but you can definitely relate with this. If so, Simon, it's like sometimes you're just inspired and sometimes you're really not. So, and it sounds fluffy. I know this is why people say, oh, branding is fluffy. But I think that there are times when you can just make amazing stuff. And that's when I'm like, I need to sit down. I was talking to Calvin. I think you probably all know Calvin. I've just forgotten his name. It's just blanked on me. And he's a motivational speaker, and he was talking about how he sat down at the weekend to sort of start writing his book. I hope that's not a secret. I hope I can reveal that. And he was like, it was just the whole day. Sometimes you just get into that creative flow and you have to make it. So batching content sounds so boring. What I would say is like just taking advantage of a creating flow. Copy with a beat. I love that, Tapas. That should be like a tagline for someone.
Nice.
See who we can sell that to. No.
So I think the real outtake from this is, if you're not crystal clear on what your brand stands for, you will inevitably be stuck on that content treadmill. You'll be running faster, but probably going nowhere. We can all easily be under the illusion that things are going well because we're growing our following, we're putting content out there all the time. But realistically, if you're not really building your brand with each bit of that content, then it's a lot of wasted energy, and it's a lot of energy. And I think increasingly, as I said, people are rejecting this idea of having to spend so much time on production. So that's the central thesis. So I guess, trying to summarize this, how do you get off the content treadmill? Well, get clarity on your brand, create those brand pillars, use your audience insights as fuel, and apply the principle of less is more. And why I say that is because if you know you're only going to produce 3 pieces of content for the sake of argument a week, for it, as I said, as an illustrative, it's going to make you work harder on that content. It's going to have to do more for you and for your brand and for your business.
Gonna take a second to look at the comments. Yeah,
so Vin's saying batching ideas, not posts. That's a nice thought, because then you get coherence of an idea with people. I like that a lot. Nikki, batch creating also involves breaking one long form into multiple things. Yes, I think that's right. But if those things are driven by your brand pillars, then that's clearly a smart way to do it.
definitely.
But
yeah,
it's making sure that upfront piece is really, really funneling everything you're doing in the process. So great points.
Yeah, and that's something I see a lot with people who are really experts in their area. They want to write something really, really long, and you look at it and you're like, that is like 8 blogs and 20 social posts, Like sometimes we want to say everything in one go, and actually you're right, Nikki. Breaking one long form thing down can be batch creating.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Okay, keeping going.
Keeping going. Getting clarity, getting more clarity.
I don't seem to be able to go for. Oh, sorry, I was going to say can't go forward.
Do you want me to click go forward?
Well, seems to have stopped going forward. Yeah. So the outcome we're looking for is posting high quality, focused content 2 or 3 times a week. I mean, that's obviously entirely up to you as how many times, but certainly from my perspective now, I think that's a reasonable target that builds your brand, not the content mountain. That's really okay, if you can produce more content than that and you've got the time to do it and resources to do that, no problem, but at least you're making sure that it's not just scattering stuff into the ether that's not actually building your brand and your position in the market.
Exactly. Do you want me to go forward?
Oh, I seem to be able to work it.
You've got it working.
Well, before we talk about that, I'd just be interested in any sort of overviews, any thoughts, any feedback on the, how it is for you producing content and what you think's important.
Yes, please tell us. Are you creating mountains and then feeling like they're not really in line with your beliefs? I think this is the thing. You can lean too hard into your creativity, and what you need to do then is go back and take a critical look at what you've been creating and say, does this still align with my beliefs? People's attention is valuable, as Simon said at the beginning. 10,000 pieces of content a day, it's pretty hard to get people's attention. So when you do, you want to make sure it's worthwhile, it's worth their time.
Very much so.
Drop any feedback in the comments, guys. We'd really love to hear it. What you've liked, what we didn't talk about enough, what we talked about too much. Tell us.
While you're doing that, here comes the commercial. I had to do it, really. I think one of the you'll forgive me for this, but
the honesty, I love it.
One of the things that I think really helps this is if you've gone through a focused process on how to nail that clarity of that brand, what your brand stands for. And that's really the focus of the brand bootcamp I run. Nadine and in fact Nikki on the in the group have done that course. I think Nadine may tell you from her own point of view what value she found from it, but it's really about getting that roadmap that content is part of, because this is not purely a content piece. This is actually about your brand and how to grow it and how to multiply the effect of your content. Only 30 days. It's not a huge commitment. It starts on the 5th of May, and obviously be delighted to see anybody there who wanted to come. I'm not going to go through this list of things, but we cover a lot of ground. I think one of the things that people find is the value in actually working with a group of people who are similar situation, like-minded. But we cover all the key aspects which will help you to make sure that you're building your brand, and therefore ultimately content is part of that, and that works. But it's not just focused on content, it's focused on all of the things you need to get your brand ready for growth.
Ellen's got an well, I mean, before we answer Ellen's question, I will talk about this a little more, but yes, everything that Simon says about the course, it was probably one of the most valuable things I've done for my business, for myself, because yeah, you are your brand, and branding is so important. Your company is inextricably tied with your personal branding. That's something that Simon not only made me sore, he kept reminding me over and over again, because sometimes you need to hear these things quite a few times. Even when we work in this industry of marketing, we have some awareness of a lot of these things. It's so hard to apply it to your brand. So your own brand, I should say, your own company. I was talking to Kirsten, who I saw in the comments the other day, about it's just we do all these things for companies. We can write incredible web pages for other companies, and then doing it for yourself is very hard. Simon gave me so much structure that I really didn't have before. We learned hard into the beliefs, and just knowing what your beliefs are as a brand really does guide so much of what you're doing. But we did tons. We did elevator pitches, we had a brand blueprint. I can go back to all of that information now, and yeah, it's not a huge time commitment. I mean, it's a lot of thinking commitment, so you have to put the thinking into it. Can you answer Ellen's question? She says,
I was just going to do that. I think that's a really interesting point you say there. You are your brand. Yes, but with a caveat. It depends. It depends on your situation. If you are a coach, for the sake of example, a personal coach, more around lifestyle and things, I think that might be true. But I think also it's really important that even if you are a personal brand, that you go through the discipline of understanding where you sit in the market. How does your brand, your service, sit against others? Because we don't exist in a bubble. Basically, there are many other people competing, and you need to be able to be clear to people how you're different, how you serve the key points of the category. And so I think, yes, personal brand is obviously important, but it's easy to get carried away that basically it's just all about my personality. That's not the same thing. You still need a reputation, and you need a professional reputation around expertise. So I think my answer would be yes, but with that caveat. What do you think, Nadine, on that? Oh, I've lost your
muted myself. Toast was being a little scandalous here in the background, so I thought I'd best mute myself. Yes, I just agree with everything. I'm going to bring up Nikki's comment as well. Even if you're in marketing like she is and has decades of experience in this, there are things that are hard to see from the outside. I don't want to put too fine a point on that, because there were so many other things that we also learned. But I think understanding your DNA, your beliefs are really important, because they are going to impact your brand. So for me, there are beliefs that apply to Rightwiser, but there are some that don't necessarily. There's always going to be a crossover because I'm the main person behind it. But when you build a company, you're building with a lot of people, so your beliefs have to be transferable to everyone. And yeah. Oh.
Yeah, and I
like
that marketer, market thyself. Yes, that's I think that's
marketing thyself. Yes, the hardest thing to do.
Ellen, forgive me. Yes, I can see now what you meant, and I've misinterpreted what you said. So let's put Ellen's comment up. What Ellen said was that she actually meant that you have to understand yourself and your own beliefs in terms of your brand. Yes, so I totally agree with that.
Nikki says there should still be firewalls.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. Mainly for one's own mental well-being, to be honest with you, and one's life.
That's a good point.
It's very easy to be utterly consumed, particularly now where we are, in the world of social media and content with business. it's not necessarily the best way.
No, very true. I mean, and I would say also, like, there might be aspects of you that just aren't professional. My sense of humor isn't always professional, so that's a good firewall to have between that and my company. But yeah, for your mental well-being, there are things that you do need to separate. I mean, if anyone's struggling with this, definitely check out this course. I'm very happy to talk about it more as well if anyone wants to. Maybe Nikki will as well. Yeah.
Brilliant. Do you want to do the last?
My last, yeah, guys. So I promised that there would be an offer at the end, and there is. So I've wrangled Simon into not only doing this live, but also to offer a brand assessment for free to anyone that stayed till the end. Thank you for staying. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something. I honestly learned something, I say, even though I saw these slides before and I've taken the boot camp. So tell us if you did learn anything, what did you learn? And if you want to take advantage of this offer that Simon is giving to us, all you need to do is DM me brand assessment. You can say hello as well if you like. Tell me
Yes,
how your
please
day's
do say
going.
hello. Yeah.
But you give me brand assessment and I'll set up a personal call with you and Simon so that you can go through what's really important to your brand, where you might need to be going. And yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you want to add to that, Simon?
No, I think that's a good assessment. From me, just thank you everyone who's turned up to listen. I hope you managed to take something out of it of value, and yeah, appreciate your time.
It's been wonderful to see you guys, the people that joined us on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook. Thank you. It's always lovely to see people join these kinds of things, because just this is the kind of value that you wouldn't get like, you know, anywhere. This free live. Thank you so much, Simon, because
Well, and
it's
thank you, Nadine, for setting this up and
no, my
being such
pleasure.
a wonderful host.
Oh, you're very kind. Yeah, I'm doing my absolute best. There should be a replay, Ellen, within the event. If you go to the original event, sorry, I'm answering questions here. If you go to the original event, you should be able to see the replay. It'll take a minute or two to load after we end the stream. If not, drop me any questions. Was there anything that we didn't answer? If people are asking for the replay, maybe they're like, can I just have a replay of that 1 minute that you said at minute 4:42.7? Who has questions? Who has anything that you would like Simon to answer right now? And while people are chatting those in, Simon, I don't know, maybe you can share a little bit about what you thought of the cohort in the last boot camp, because that was one thing that I really loved, was all the people that I met on it, not only working with you, but working with a load of incredible professionals that I could learn from. How did you feel working with all of us crazy people?
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. And funnily enough, I saw someone this morning who'd been on, of course, Russell, who you remember,
Yeah.
and he was making exactly the same point as you, really, about the
Oh.
value of being able to see other people in not in the same category necessarily, not even in the same geography, but actually sharing similar problems and working them through together. So I really do think that is one of the values. You know, I'm really the host and the guide to support you, really, to come out with the outcome that you really need.